Welcome to the Horus Audiobook channel. Don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating content.
The Magical Revival by Kenneth Grant. Acknowledgements. The author has at his disposal the entire body of Aleister Crowley's writings, published and unpublished, and wishes to thank Mr. John Simons, Crowley's literary executor, for allowing complete freedom in the use of it. He also wishes to thank Frater Ani Abtilal, 9th degree OTO, who made available an initiated tantric work on the worship of the Supreme Goddess by an adept of the left-hand path, which has thrown much light on the draconian mysteries that Crowley and others helped to revive.
Forward. For us, who have the inner knowledge, inherited or won, it remains to restore the true rights of Attis, Adonis, Ozinus, of Set, Serapis, Mithras, and Abel. These words of Aleister Crowley inspired me as a youth, and, imagining myself as one of those to whom they were addressed, I soon discovered that for some reason I have not been able to fathom, it was the god Set that I was being called upon to honor. I accordingly took it upon myself to penetrate the mysteries of this, the most ancient of deities, and to trace the history of his rites from an indefinite antiquity to the present day. When I wrote The Magical Revival 20 years ago, I had no notion that the book would form the first of a series of trilogies that I would still be engaged upon in the 90s, nor did I expect it to interest any but the serious occultist. But the numerous letters which I received after its publication, and the often profound comments expressed in them, caused me to plan the series subsequently known as the Typhonian Trilogies. Toward the close of the 80s, I was approached by Scoob Esoterica, who sought to reissue under the title of Hidden Lore the Carfax monographs, which I had produced in the early 60s in collaboration with Steffi Grant. This project led not only to the task of publishing the next of the remaining volumes of the trilogies under the careful editing of Christopher Johnson and Caroline Wise, but also to the reprinting of the earlier titles. So here again is The Magical Revival. Kenneth Grant, London, 1990. The knower of truth should go about the world outwardly stupid like a child, a madman, or a devil. Mahavakya Ratnamala.
Introduction. The purpose of this book is to place in perspective the various occult tendencies that led up to the revival of interest in occultism in recent years, and to interpret this resurgence in terms of humanity's need for a universal approach to reality that transcends all previous systems of mystical and magical attainment. Emphasis is placed upon the work of Aleister Crowley, 1875-1947, who embodies in a highly concentrated form the particular magical tradition that underlies the present revival, and for a similar reason, space is given to Osman Spare, 1889-1956, Dion Fortune, 1891-1946, and Charles Stansfeld Jones, 1889-1950, and others, who in their own peculiar way revitalized the current. Having for many years practiced magic as a result of personal contact with Crowley, I have been able to relate his work to the ancient systems which he has been instrumental in reviving. My interpretation of his work is not a matter of speculation, for it can be substantiated entirely by reference to the vast mass of material, diaries, letters, essays, books, etc., which survived his death in 1947, from which I have freely quoted. As regards Austin, being his literary executor, I have access to all known books, letters, and drawings, and during innumerable visits to his studio workshop in Walworth South, I was able to obtain first-hand knowledge of his methods and to persuade him to dictate some apostrophes to me. The view I put forward in dealing with his system may provide a basis for understanding his many heart-meld out as the physical, the metaphysical was the exoteric version, not vice versa. This is proved conclusively by the 17th chapter of the Book of the Dead, which is certainly the oldest body of written teachings known to man. Here, side by side with the text which was intended for general use, appears the interpolated gloss of the initiated priest, explaining the text after the manner of the gnosis, or magical tradition. The secret, oral, or hidden wisdom embodied in the gloss refers to the physical origins of the abstract concepts that appear in the text. Spiritual matters are explained in terms of physical, more precisely of physiological phenomena. These explanations were usually reserved for initiates, and the reason for their concealment was due to the physical nature of the gnosis, which became in truth the forbidden wisdom of later ages. The ancients may not have been acquainted with psychology, sexology, and endocrinology as known today, but they most certainly were acquainted with the occult uses of the sexual current, the improper handling of which leads to disaster. And they were infinitely more knowledgeable concerning the sexual sciences than our Western psychologists today. In medieval times, secrecy was resorted to more as a safeguard for the occultist than for the world of which he formed a part. The scene is not much different today, except that the tables are turned. The indiscriminate revelation of occult formula often leads to insanity and death. The unprepared who meddle with occult processes invite trouble. In the realm of profane science, the horror of the situation today is only too apparent. The magician, who was the scientist of bygone days, was wiser than his modern counterpart. He hedged his science about in order to protect not only himself, but the world about him. The reader will therefore appreciate the reason for the peculiar method employed in the construction of this book. I have resorted to the time-tested method of symbolic metathesis when the subject matter requires that veil of secrecy no less today of the occultist than of the hierophant of ancient times. With this difference, I have introduced no blinds, no deliberately misleading statements or vague allusions to formula that cannot be shown to be as precise in their action and reaction as their analogues in the more orthodox sciences. As some of the terms used in this book may be unfamiliar to readers unacquainted with the works of Aleister Crowley or of occultism generally, an exhaustive glossary is appended. Finally, I have, where necessary, adopted Crowley's orthography of the word magic to distinguish it from the ceremonial techniques with which it is usually and almost exclusively associated.
1. Return of the Phoenix. In 1933, Crowley wrote a series of articles for a daily newspaper in which he denounced black magic in no uncertain terms. To practice black magic, you have to violate every principle of science, decency, and intelligence. You must be obsessed with an insane idea of the importance of the petty object of your wretched and selfish desires. I have been accused of being a black magician. No more foolish statement was ever made about me. I despise the thing to such an extent that I can hardly believe in the existence of people so debased and idiotic as to practice it. In Paris and even in London, there are misguided people who are abusing their priceless spiritual gifts to obtain petty and temporary advantages through these practices. The Black Mass is a totally different matter. I could not celebrate it if I wanted to, for I am not a consecrated priest of the Christian Church. The articles answered those, and they were many, who accused him not only of being a black magician, but of performing black masses and perverted rites. The ill-considered calumny continues, and Crowley's name, nearly a quarter of a century after his death, is still associated with baleful sorcery and diabolism. This misconception is not easy to rectify, partly owing to massive ignorance on the subject of occultism and partly owing to prejudices stemming from faulty conditioning. To an individual living 5,000 years ago, long before the biblical version of Genesis had been written down, Crowley's cult of Satan, or Shaitan as then called, would have evoked no feelings of perversity and guilt. Even the later pagan traditions, forthright and free of shame, would have been at home with Crowley's ideas. Until we get to grips with the matter in a spirit of impartial inquiry, and, even more important, until we check the tendency to interpret concepts in the light of their decadence rather than according to their pristine values, we shall fail to understand Crowley's work and the real nature of the magical revival he has helped to bring about. Ancient concepts and symbols were already in their dotage before Christianity supplied the final douse to their vitality. The confusion of esoteric concepts and the decadence of symbols has rarely been exhibited so clearly as in St. John's Revelation, where fragments only of the ancient mysteries are presented without full knowledge of their inner meaning. The scribe, or scribes, was either a non-initiate or he willfully misrepresented the ancient wisdom for political purposes, or even more probably, his work has been worked over by other hands. The literal smearing and destruction of the ancient symbols in the catacombs is as nothing compared to the systematic iconoclasm that had been operative for centuries in the secret sanctuaries of Judaism and Christendom, where documents were destroyed, texts mutilated, and deliberately distorted to make way for the cult of that supreme anomaly in the history of religions, a historic Savior who died and resurrected in the flesh. Apart from certain Gnostic texts preserved, paradoxically, by the early Christian fathers, the monuments and funerary texts of ancient Egypt remain to testify to the true gnosis of light which the promoters of the doctrine of a carnalized Christ endeavored to extinguish. Before the present magical revival can therefore be understood, we have to know what magic is, and what exactly is being revived, for, strange as it may appear, what is now resurging is the pre-Christian gnosis, the cult of Satan, even though, as of yet, it is only beginning to return in a halting and broken form. It was Aleister Crowley who fanned the flame to furnace heat, which he did when the world was destroyed by fire in 1904. This phrase is a technical one. It signifies destruction and supersession in a sense that may only be interpreted by resorting to the astronomical myth cycles from which it derives. The subject is referred to more fully later on. Crowley was in Cairo at the time of this event. There he received the Book of the Law, the New Gnosis, the latest Tantra, the most complex grimoire, from a praeter-human intelligence named Aiwass, a messenger of that most ancient god whose image was worshipped in the deserts under the name of Shaitan, and, long ages earlier, as Set, the soul or double of Horons. Before going back to the origins of this cult, however, we should first examine briefly the more immediate past when the flame of the gnosis glowed secretly in the hostile environment of an ignorant age. The massive resurgence of interest in the hidden side of things, in the noumenal aspect of the phenomenal world, owes itself largely to the gradual dissolution of long-standing social mores. This had made it possible to unseal dormant cells of consciousness through the use of sex, drugs, alcohol, and other methods of consciousness control and exploration.
The genesis of this change occurred in the latter half of the last century, when Helena Blavatsky threw open the doors of Eastern esotericism and made it available to the Western world. Also, the trend of scientific opinion changed course and began confirming the findings of mystics and occult scientists, ancient and modern. These strands were gathered together and concentrated in a single knot in the year 1875, the year in which two events of far-reaching importance coincided: the foundation, by Blavatsky, of the Theosophical Society, and the birth in Warwickshire, England, of Aleister Crowley. In order properly to assess these circumstances, it is necessary to understand that an equally significant event was pending: the emergence of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which had existed in one form or another, and under other names, for an incalculable period of time. The Golden Dawn was the inner mystery school of the order that formulated itself in the outer world as the Theosophical Society. Blavatsky's intention in initiating her society was primarily the destruction of Christianity in its historic as opposed to its eternal form. This fact is either glossed over or totally ignored by most writers on the society and its foundress, but it is paramount to an understanding of the vital current that inspired the Golden Dawn, and even more paramount in fathoming the reason for Crowley's identifying himself with the anti-Christian formula of the beast, 666. This formula is primarily destructive. It invokes the powers of Horus known as Ra-Hor-Quit, or Herakti, which necessarily precedes the advent of its twin and complementary power, symbolized by that ancient devil of the Akkadian race whom Crowley invokes beneath the mask, or persona, of Horbarkrat, Harpocrates, also called Aiwaz. The true occult order, sometimes called the Great White Brotherhood, and by Crowley the AAA, manifested in the West in 1886 as the Golden Dawn. Before this specific manifestation, the Brotherhood numbered among its openly unavowed representatives such authorities as Sir Edward Bulwer-Lytton, Eliphas Levi, Fred Hockley, Kenneth Mackenzie, Gerald Macy, Fablet d'Olivet, and others. Bulwer-Lytton links up historically with the Continental Adepts, Eliphas Levi, Gerald Enkhaus Pappas, Rudolf Steiner, and Franz Hartmann, celebrated names in Western occultism. These collateral continental elements constituted what was once known as the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light. Not long after the birth of the Theosophical Society, the Brotherhood of Light, until then fairly loosely organized, was, around 1875, concentrated into 10 initiatory degrees under Dr. Karl Kellner, an Austrian adept who revealed the true name of the Brotherhood as the Ordo Templi Orientis, the Order of the Temple of the East signifying the place of sunrise, the source of illumination. The initials OTO also symbolize the solar phallic energy of the beast, which Crowley later incorporated in his personal magical seal. Karl Kellner was the first OHO of the newly constituted OTO, for long before this, an Order of the Temple under Jacques Molay, 1293 to 1313, had existed and prepared the Renaissance by fusing the mysteries of East and West, and the outer history of the order can be traced long anterior to this event. This order also included the Hermetic Brethren known as the Illuminati, headed in the 18th century by the notorious Adam Weishaupt, whose work, though still incalculable, is of undoubted significance in relation to the present magical revival. Jean Adam Weishaupt, 1748 to 1830, founded the Order of the Illuminati on May 1, 1776. He adopted the symbol of the point within the circle to represent the current that found expression through him. He formulated the basic principles of the order in terms very similar to those which Crowley uses in Liber Oz. See illustration. The lost word in Weishaupt's system is man. The recovery of this word required that man should find himself again, that the redemption of humanity is to be effected through and by man, that man should govern himself and throw off the shackles of alien powers and controls. In a word, he should become a king in his own right, by virtue of his primal inheritance. Later in Crowley's system, the idea of the kingly man became paramount. It is synonymous with being a Thelemite, i.e., one who has discovered his true will, Thelema, and is capable of doing it. Hence, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. When Crowley assumed control of the OTO, he chose for it its motto, Deus est homo, God is man, and in Liber Oz he declares there is no God but man. It was to man that he addressed his manifesto when, in the middle of the Mediterranean in 1924, he declared Thelema, will, to be the word of the law, in accordance with what had been revealed to him by Aiwaz in Cairo 20 years previously. The Equinox, a series of massive volumes which Crowley published periodically, and which he described as the Encyclopedia of Initiation, was also called the official organ of the AAA, the Review of Scientific Illuminism. Among the names of those who, according to Crowley, represented this current in past ages, appears that of Adam Weishaupt. Count Cagliostro, born 1743, and Anton Mesmer, 1734 to 1815, were among those who were initiated into the Order of the Illuminati. Cagliostro was initiated in Frankfurt in 1781, under the authority of the Grand Masters of the Templars, another name of the Illuminati. He received instructions and large sums of money from Weishaupt, who sent him to France, where Cagliostro's special mission was to Illuminize French Masonry. Weishaupt, whose early training was influenced by the Jesuits, founded the Illuminati, as Blavatsky founded the Theosophical Society, with the main intention of destroying the baleful effects of organized Christianity. Weishaupt claimed to have used for good ends the means which the Jesuits had used for bad. Harkening back to St. Ignatius Loyola, 1491 to 1556, Weishaupt introduced an obligation of unconditional obedience into the constitution of his order. Thus, Illuminism, as conceived by Weishaupt, was modeled on the Society of Jesus, although it proposed a plan of campaign diametrically opposed to it. Although the Order of the Illuminati was suppressed in 1786, Weishaupt and his inner circle of adepts continued to operate in secret behind the veil of Freemasonry, with which the order had linked itself in 1778. Weishaupt maintained that the Illuminati were less than an order, but a current that could operate more effectively under cover of something else, under other names and other occupations. Cagliostro succeeded in forming a link with the Martinist order, founded by Martinez Pasquali in 1754, with which Anton Mesmer was also involved. The Illuminati gradually gained control of all important orders until an Illuminized network of occult societies had been created. In 1880, the order was revived in Dresden by Leopold Engel. It was with this revived current that Rudolf Steiner was connected, and Franz Hartmann, founder of the Order of the Esoteric Rosicruce, was connected both with Engel's Illuminati and with the Theosophical Society. In 1895, Dr. Karl Kellner carried on the system, calling it the Ordo Templi Orientis, thus reverting to the pre-Weishauptian designation. On Kellner's death in 1905, a German theosopht named Theodor Reuss and Franz Hartmann constituted the Inner Council of the OTO. It was Reuss who initiated Steiner into the OTO. The point within the circle, the symbol of the Illuminati, is not only the hierogram of the sun and of the god Horus, but also, in Crowley's system, is symbolic of the union of Nuit and Hadit, which are emblematic of consciousness and its projection as a ray of light. The union of the circle, Nuit, and the point, Hadit, formulates their child, or combined wills expressed as Ra-Hur-Quit. The circle and the point also represent the abstract expressions of love and will, twin components of the magical equation known as the law of Thelema. Diane Fortune, in Aspects of Occultism, published posthumously in 1962, observes that primitive cults, such as Voodoo, initiates the subconscious, Hinduism initiates the higher self, and Christianity initiates the personality, the lower self.
Here she refers to the true Gnostic Christianity, the eternal religion, as opposed to the cult of the carnalized Christ of historic Christianity. Osman Spare, Aleister Crowley, and Diane Fortune developed precisely these three lines of activity. Spare's formula of atavistic resurgence, see Chapter 12, develops the voodoo line by means of a system of sigils deriving from his alphabet of desire, each letter of which represents a phase of sexual consciousness. He used the formula in conjunction with a ritual called the death posture. Instead of the vivères of African sorcery and West Indian voodoo,
Spare employed various occult geometries embodying in linear form the sound vibrations peculiar to the gods, or levels of subconsciousness, to be invoked. These vibrations constitute the mantras of the gods. His system derives not only from the Golden Dawn, but also from the initiated occult traditions of the original draconian cult, operative in the dark dynasties of ancient Egypt. At the other extreme, the theme of Crowley's work is his ritual for achieving congress with the higher self, or holy guardian angel. To this end, he successfully adapted an ancient Akkadian or Sumerian rite used by the Yazidi, the devil worshippers of Lower Mesopotamia. Crowley identified their devil with Aiwaz, his own holy guardian angel, a peculiar state of affairs which will be explained later. To awaken and exalt the magical consciousness, Crowley used a type of ritual reminiscent of the Tantras. Diane Fortune, in her turn, evolved a system for creating the magical personality from the debris of everyday life. Her work involved the use of lunar magic. She used the energies manifesting through sexual polarity. Her novel, Moon Magic, posthumously published in 1956, explains the mystique, if not the actual mechanism of the process. She stressed the close relationship between the endocrine system and the chakras, the centers of magical power in the human organism. Her controlled dreaming technique derives from the Golden Dawn spirit vision and recalls aspects of the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius Loyola, who founded the Society of Jesus. These aspects of spiritual development form the three major themes characteristic of the present-day revival of magic, and they reflect the three major phases of consciousness exemplified in mythology as the astral, lunar, and solar currents of the great work. Crowley's system particularly resumes all three. The injunction, "Do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law," first appeared in The Book of the Law, which Crowley received in Cairo in 1904, while in direct astral communication with the daemon, Aiwaz. "Do what thou wilt" is the first half of a magical formula which Crowley practiced throughout his life. The second half, "Love is the law, love under will," is its complement. This also appeared in the Book of the Law, or, more precisely, the Book of the Law of Thelema, for the text, comprising 3 brief chapters, is a comment on this double formula. Crowley spent the greater part of his life attempting to fathom the mysteries of this singular book, and he said in his last years that much still remained dark. But he fathomed enough of it to found a system of magic unrivaled in the history of Western occultism. The essence of "do what thou wilt" and its corollary is not new. On the contrary, it is as ancient and ageless as the Tao and the Te, the Yin and the Yang, Siva and Sakti, or the Tibetan imagery of Yab-Yum. What is new is its emphasis upon action, upon doing, rather than upon non-action and surrender. Thelema is a dynamic formula, not a static one, and it requires the precise formulation before action of the energy which is to be its mainspring. When Aiwaz communicated the law, he uttered the word will in Greek, because Greek, like Hebrew, Arabic, and Coptic, has its own Kabbalah, each letter being also a number. Thelema therefore signifies not only will, which is its literal meaning, but also 93, a number of vital significance in Crowley's system. The Greek word agape, meaning love, also adds to 93, and so does I was, thus identifying these seemingly diverse ideas in a mystical unity. The three highest Sephiroth, which formed the supernal triad of the Tree of Life, also add up to 93, when the secret key of the Book of the Law, AL, is applied in a special manner. The Book of the Law was published several times in Crowley's lifetime, and each publication was followed, within a comparatively short time, by international disasters: the Balkan War, the First World War, the Sino-Japanese War, and World War II. It was Crowley's belief that when the book is finally published in strict accordance with the instructions given by Aiwaz in its third chapter, it will effect the total destruction of civilization as we know it. So far, the instructions have been imperfectly executed, and the Holocaust, therefore, incomplete. The Thelemic book is not merely passively prophetic, but actively charged with a power strong enough to reduce whole dynasties to rubble. Crowley describes the phoenix of Thelema that will arise from the dust and debris of civilization in a brief but powerful work entitled The Heart of the Master.
Did you enjoy this content? Then click the link in the description and get the full audiobook now to dive even deeper into this journey. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share it with someone who will love it too.